Of course, carefree school days, visiting engine works or bunking engine sheds soon came to an end. It became time to leave school and start working for a living.
And at school, they didn't do much for us in the way of interviewing. There was no careers business. But we're all herded into the headmaster's office. On the last few weeks we were there, and this man said, now I want to talk to you about a job. And I said, well, I've got one. He says, what do you mean you've got one? I said, I've been to the engine sheds. I've had an interview with the shed-master. And on the 26th of June, 1957, I had a day off school to go and have my medical at Derby. It was all cut and dried, so I finished with the school and the school finished with me. They realised I wasn't going to change my mind. I don't think my father was the least bit amused.
My father had my name down at the age of 10 to go on the railway. And I remember going down to see them in the office because I wasn't sure, and I went to Mr. Hazeldine was the clerk, and I'm only a lad of 12 at the time. He showed me down the list that my name was there.
I mean, even on the back of the ENL and ABCs, the British Railways were advertising, so they knew who their target audience was. On the back of this one here, this is 1957, Part 3, London, Midlands, Scottish Regions. It says, British Railways have a message for boys about to leave school. For boys over 15 years and over, there's a wide variety of jobs available on British Railways in the following departments, and it goes on to list commercial operating, motive power, engine cleaners and apprentices. So they wanted the clerks as well as the engine cleaners.
It was muted around that there was a chance of jobs there, and the fact that my father had worked on the railway, I think it stood me in good stead, and I did manage to get a job there, along with 5 other lads. And the chief clerk said to me, if you'd have come here when you left school, we'd have started you right away. They knew my dad, and it was family affairs in those days, very often, jobs on the railway. So I started there on January the 3rd, 1924.
And at 15 we left school with no qualifications at all.
School broke up on the Friday, and I managed to get the job the week previous, and they said, you can start next Monday. At the particular time, my brother was an apprentice. There was only 3 of us in the house, so we had to have an income coming in, because my mum did part-time work, so I had no holidays that year at all.
There was no such thing as further education. The household needed the money, you left school and you went to work.
But at that time, your parents and your friends always said you had to have a trade. Anyway, my parents had a friend who was a driver at Bolton Shed, and I said, I think I want to go on railway. So they said, go and see Harry. Well, he did all sorts to try to persuade me not to go on this railway. He said, listen, you're a young lad, you've got all sorts of shift work, you sign on any time in 24 hours, it's a dirty job, it's unsocial because you'll have friends and you'll not see them because you'll be on these shifts. I said, no, I fancy it. I'm not bothered about what happens to my social life, it must change. Didn't take any notice of this friend of ours about railways. I thought, I want a job. Anyway, I went down to Crescent Road and there'd no vacancies, so I was, bloody heartbroken. So, unknown to me, my mother went to Bury, because that's where we came from, and went down to Buckley Wells. And they said, send him down. Anyway, I went down and had to see the shed master, who were called Mr. Tapley. So I go in his office and he asked me, what were I after like? I said, well, I want to work on steam engines. He said, you don't just go on steam engines, you've got to start as an engine cleaner. I said, well, yeah, but how long does that last? He said, well, it can last a bit. But on the other hand, he said, as soon as we can get you going on firing, we'll get you passed out, because there's different grades. I said, yeah, that sounds all right.
And then one evening my mother showed me an advert in the Manchester Evening Chronicle, which existed at that time. Cleaners wanted, Agecroft Shed. The day after, I was down to the shed and had an interview with the shed master. It was quite a simple interview. There was no academic requirement. All you needed to be was fit and healthy and looking all right. So there were a few questions and answers. I had to fill a little form in with 1 or 2 questions on, just basic questions. And that was it. That was the interview. But it was easily enough to become a railwayman. And started on the railway the week after. At that time, of course, it was LMS.
There was no break between school and work. and more or less a few days after my 15th birthday I was a cleaner. The same, I think, as all kids felt when they started work in those days. You were a bit of a schoolboy thrust into a man's world, and it took a lot of adjusting to, but you had to adjust to it because nobody had any sympathy for you. You'd started work and that's it, your school days were over and it was get it in gear and get something done. And I soon settled down to it.
To come straight from the classroom onto a loco shed, and you've got to bear in mind that some of these sheds would be 100 years old. You'd be in a dirty, drafty shed where the roof leaked and there was oil and grease everywhere. And you're a 15-year-old coming straight from school into an atmosphere like that, and then seeing these engines close up can be quite a frightening experience.